You just roll it all.
I was going to throw it away today.
Yeah.
I'll put your name first in the title. It'll be Don.
Ah,
Tyler,
Yeah.
Josh.
okay.
You ready to go?
Yep.
All
Ready.
right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Bible Recap Podcast. Again, Tyler, Don, and I'm Pastor Josh. And we are in week 10 of our discussion.
Yes, we
and
Here we go.
41 more days. 41 more.
42.
Well, I know, but after today,
Yeah, true.
right? Yeah.
No, still 2, because it's 52 minus 10 is 42.
I don't know, but you start with 1. It's always
Okay.
confusing. Math's hard, guys.
Man, you guys work at the bank. You guys make me nervous now.
It's called a calculator, Josh.
All right, so week 10, days 64 to 70. Goodness, I can't even read. And of course, as we mentioned last week, that we're finishing the book of Numbers, looking at chapters 22 to 36, and then looking at the first 2 chapters of the book of Deuteronomy. Easier to say than it is to spell.
Yeah. Well, unless you're me, and it's both.
All right, so let's get underway, and Don's going to kick us off with the questions.
Number 1, the words we use are important and significant, but Balaam knows that his words are worthless against God's plan. He can't curse people God has blessed. How does this idea compare to the common belief that we have the power to speak things into existence? Can you think of a time when you've been tempted to ascribe too much power on your own words or to someone else's?
So, as I was reading this, the saying, I don't know, I had a hard time answering this, but as you were reading it, the saying, from your lips to God's ears, and like sayings like that, more of like trusting in, how do I say this? Trusting in the word out there, like pretty much saying, okay, let's make this happen type of thing. But, yeah. And then, I kind of lost where I was going there with that. Sorry.
It's all good.
But,
It's all good.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I had just put, my sister-in-law, Jan, had kidney cancer. And from probably halfway through the journey, and when she realized it had spread, from that moment on, she truly believed that every time she went to the doctor, it was going to be gone, because she just knew.
Yeah.
And she would tell people that. And I was always one that was like, it's a big statement. But that was what came to my mind was Jan, that she believed God was going to take that tumor away, and he did.
Yeah.
I mean, it was gone. It took maybe 3 times of her going back, and it was never a significant change. But the last time, it just was no longer there.
Yeah.
So she said all along, I knew it was going to be gone. She said it enough, she believed it enough, and it was gone.
Yeah.
And then to the second part, I've never felt like I've ever been tempted with anything that I have to say. But it did make me think of that. What was that guy's name that took them all to? Oh, he started here in the United States, and then they went. And he killed all the people with
the Jones.
Jim Jones, yes.
Yeah.
Jonesboro.
That made me think of
Jonestown,
him, that he
he
was preaching his word so much to the people that they believed what he had to say. But I don't know if I'm on the right
Well,
page
even like
or
Waco.
not.
Waco too.
Well, that's
with,
true.
Yeah, another perfect example. I think you're on the right track, because giving people's words too much power. Because let's just keep it basic. Politicians make promises that sound good, and then people will vote for them based on the promise. Yet when they're actually in office, they fail to do that. Of course, it's not just in politics. Pastors are guilty of it. Bosses of businesses, corporations are guilty of it. To where we can attribute so much power to what they say that it just seems like, they're the golden goose when if you actually step out of the bubble and be like, you know what? That's actually nonsense.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned this during our Christmas or one of our previous discussions in the previous book. The John Lennox quote: "Nonsense is still nonsense," even spoken by world famous scientists.
Yeah. Yep. So,
And so, I think there's definitely a temptation where we give people too much power to what they say, and sometimes I think for ourselves, not in a sense of a delusional, but maybe an overconfidence, and maybe in some circumstances or scenarios where we want so hard for something to be true that it's not God, but it's like I want it, it's gonna be true because I want it to be true, not because of taking God out of the equation. Where in the story here with Balaam recognized that I can't go beyond what God permits me to say, no matter how much Balak was really going to throw money and all sorts of other stuff at him.
Yeah.
But of course, then he contributes to the
downfall.
To the downfall with throwing the
24,000
promiscuous ladies over at Israel.
Was it 24,000 people, if I remember right? Mm-hmm. I know it was 24 something. Do you remember it was 100 or 1,000?
It was 1,000.
It was numbers.
Yeah.
There's a lot of numbers in the book of Numbers.
A lot of numbers.
But I was on Don saying kind of like what we were talking right before of if you think positively, positive things will happen. Mm-hmm. And I think that's God in us as well. But also if you think negatively, negative things happen.
And I think even to go further, like in Jan's case, she knew the only way that was going to happen was with God's intervention.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't her really speaking that. She was speaking that truths because of God. But.
Yeah. Well, I think too, we sometimes we receive validation to whether through our mindset, whether it's positive or a negative mindset, especially catastrophizing. We catastrophize everything and things don't work out. It's like, well, see, I told you. It was like, no, it's because you went in with a really junky attitude and you basically undermine yourself.
Pretty much, yep.
All right, number 2. Moses has pushed back regularly on some of God's declarations about what he's going to do. Does he ever push back on God's decision that he won't enter the promised land? Why do you think he responds to this the way he does?
I accidentally read ahead.
Oh, yeah?
Into what would be day 71's stuff. And where he kind of, I think it's...
Well, what's in 71?
Well, it's chapter 3 in Deuteronomy. I pretty much what I said was kind of, because when God says you're not going into Jordan, and he's like, you sure? Like, it's right there, kind of is what I got from it. So he was more of like a parent or like a kid with a parent. You kind of test those boundaries, and I felt like that's kind of what he was doing there, like trying to throw that question out. But I don't know. That's where I kept thinking, because I accidentally listened ahead on when I had it on. So it was kind of hard for me to go back to what our readings was. So,
yep, I just turned there. Yeah, I see it right there.
Yeah, he was kind of just like testing it and like, yeah, you sure we don't? I can't go. I'm right there. So I know I'm paraphrasing that to modern day, but so that's pretty much what I kept thinking of when I was reading that. So,
yeah, but I think for the most part, Moses
was pretty
prior to chapter 3 of Deuteronomy, kind of just takes it, and I think in one of his speeches even says, even I'm not going to be able to go, and so
because I kind of looked at it, I didn't go forward. I went more. That felt like he was kind of the chosen one of God to lead the people, even though he wasn't. And then I also thought it doesn't matter that he's not going to the promised land, because he's going to be in heaven with God. So I thought where he was going was better than being left here on earth.
And the other thing is his job was to lead them to the promised land. He got them there. His job was done. He's 120 some years old. So also it's like, might be a little tired.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's the thing is with some of with covering a broad scope of events like Numbers does, and even Leviticus, is that sometimes we might, what may not be recorded is some of those moments where Moses was in the tent of meeting going, "Are you sure, God?"
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
Which, of course, we get in Deuteronomy chapter 3. So, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Hashtag spoiler alert.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Are we ready?
I think so.
Why do you think God needs to help remind people to worship only Him and to rest? How are those two commandments connected?
I think this was a really good question.
Yeah. I had to do extra research into it. I couldn't just read what she had to say. And I don't know. I found this website that I can't remember exactly. It's like, I think they said it's something along Speak with God or something.com. And it was kind of like a encyclopedia of the Bible, but it has certain things like this. And one of the things is how it's connected. And later when I read back through this, she kind of connected it too, is most other gods in that time, you were a whole bunch of sacrifices, you're doing a whole bunch of work, where our God, to worship Him, you relax, you rest, get your body ready, and then only thing that whole day is about Him. So that was kind of why you're connecting, the worship and also the keep the holy day or the Sabbath holy. And it's also kind of like give yourself a break and just worry about your relationship with God that day. So
That's pretty much what I had, was reconnecting.
Yeah.
I mean, He's giving us that day to reconnect just with Him, to put Him first. And idols, I mean, I even went as far as like looking into myself, and we have so many idols Monday through Saturday that Sunday really is our time to reconnect, because I'm very guilty of it. You just get so busy that sometimes you don't take the time Monday through Saturday to reconnect or worship like you should. And so that Sunday is just that reminder that it is about Him.
And that is one of the things I've always admired about the Jewish faith. I don't know if you ever heard of the story of Jewish Michael Jordan. Was a basketball player. I cannot think of his name. I just know
I remember the picture in Sports Illustrated. So
but could have gone to any major college program, but they play on Sundays some days, and could have gone to the NBA. They definitely play on Sundays. He would not do it, so he ended up going to a smaller junior college that was Jewish based, All-American, but they did not play on Sundays, and he ended up not being able to go to the next level because of his faith and keeping the Sabbath holy. So, that would be hard for a lot of people to turn down millions of dollars just to keep your faith. So it's kind of, I just lost the word that I'm trying to think of, but inspiring that, his faith is that strong in what he believes that he was willing to turn down an easy life for his faith. So, but yeah, that's another thing I kept thinking of during this, is just how inspiring the Jewish faith is on how strict they are with it. So,
yeah, I think you guys, hit the question. The two commandments God keeps reminding us, the two things that we keep struggling with. And depending on your idol temptation, but also we live in such a season of busyness that, burnout is becoming an increasingly bad problem. Even just to take a day. And research has shown that that's actually better for you to take 2 full weeks off of vacation in a row, because they found in one study that it takes you about 7 days just to disconnect. And so you don't actually are able to rest and relax until after that first week off.
Yeah.
And I can attest to that because when I took the 3 weeks off and my blood pressure was 196 over 98, it was such a turnaround. Just I took a 2 weeks off, just vacation, and then I did a continuing ed week where it was low stress. It was during COVID, so it was all online. So all I had to do was sit there and listen and just glance down my book, make sure I was on the right page. I mean, it was good training, but again, low stress to where, I think as the lowest I got down to, because my family's got a history of high blood pressure, but I think I got down to 118 at one point. So, I mean,
yeah, that's a big difference.
3 weeks off was a major impact. And of course,
I need you to start telling my boss that so I get 3 weeks vacation.
Just makes me think when we went on a cruise with some friends of ours, one couple cruised all the time. And he brought the question to the table one evening. He says, what makes you more anxious? Is when you get out on the ocean and you can't see land, or when you start seeing land coming back in from the ocean? And I thought, my first was like, it's a little eerie feeling when you're out there and that's all you see is water. But by the end of the week, I realized my anxiousness went up as soon as I saw land, because my trip was over. I was having to go back into real life.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily like, what the land represented. So I thought, I mean, it just made me think, but if we don't rest and wrap our minds around.
Yeah. And I think this is, God also is telling us, take care of yourself, as long as, like, even when we talked about his other rules he made with Israelites and Abraham before then, the cleanliness, have to be clean to go.
A lot of rules.
Well,
there's a lot of rules, but
it says later, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. I mean, so it's there as a good thing for us. And so I think we need to keep that in mind when we buy all these contraptions that have been sold to us. Oh, this will make your life easier. Well, actually, I'm more stressed out, more connected. I mean,
the phones.
Emails now come right to my pocket and buzz this and buzz that. And I keep talking about it, but I'm thinking about deleting the email apps off of my phone. But constant connection. And of course, then there's, for some people, they've experienced, whether real or perceived, the perception that if work sends them an email, even though they're not on the clock, they'll be tempted to answer it.
Oh, we do.
I do. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting in my chair in front of the TV and 8 o'clock at night, I get an email from a customer. It's easier in my head, it's easier for me to answer it right then while they're working on it than it is to wait till morning.
It's like God sets boundaries for us, but we don't.
Yeah.
And that's where I find struggle, because I don't have my job as a pastor, you're not really defined by a 9 to 5. And so it's like, well, a lot of stuff happens in the afternoons and evenings, and they're here and there and everywhere. And
For sure.
Contrary to popular belief, pastors do not work for an hour on Sunday. Here it's 2 hours. So I'm just kidding.
Well, you forgot the 45 minutes in between.
All right, number 4. Which commandments are the most difficult for you to keep?
I find the murdering one a challenge.
Yeah.
Really?
Using the Lord's name in vain, unfortunately.
Mine was shall not covet and keeping the Sabbath holy.
Yeah.
For me, a real answer is the Sabbath. And I think, I'll struggle with this, but I'm learning more about taking the Lord's name in vain, because when I grew up, it was all about, cussing and, saying the GD word.
Yeah.
Is that it's not just that, but also, lying and applying God's name to the lie, or using his, or maybe even
kind of like what the Israelites were, I guess, when they were using his name against him, I guess. Kind of like
His
I was
name,
trying to think,
or like even
like
I would
last week.
even include when what's his name, atheist called God a bully, where you're misdescribing characteristics of God that are not actually of God, that are actually properly descriptions of Him. And so, I think for me, even now I'm still growing to learn more about the Ten Commandments. But I think the number one struggle for me is the Sabbath one.
So I will say, since starting reading this, I've noticed I do use the Lord's name in vain more than I should, but I'm starting to catch it a lot more than before. You just roll off the tongue and won't even think about it. And now I'm actually thinking about it and, apologizing right then and moving on, and then versus just not even noticing. So I feel like I'm growing there, but not just still not perfect. We're not, no one's perfect, but,
well, and I wonder when we get to Matthew and the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus, then, you've heard it said, you shall not murder, but even if you hate your brother, then you are guilty of murder. I'm thinking, man, how many times I get frustrated with somebody and I'm smacking them around in my head. Yeah. Confession. Even pastors get frustrated with y'all. We love you, but sometimes we get frustrated.
I guess we call that mental assault. All right.
It's my turn, I believe.
Yeah.
Number 5, why is God so adamant that the Israelites drive out all the Canaanites in the Promised Land? I thought this was an excellent question, too.
I just think that He knows their limitations and how easily they've been swayed before. So if you cast everything out of the Promised Land that may sway them away from Him rather than bringing Him towards Him, He may save Himself a headache or two down the road. So I think He's planning ahead, knowing if He would let them stay, what would happen to His people. So
that's pretty much what I said too. And then they were just, Canaanites are bad influences, and we don't have any recourse against them. We just seem to follow.
Well, at the end of Numbers, God says, if you don't dispossess them of the land, and you let them be among you, I'm going to then do the same to you. And of course, we kind of know that there's an exile that's going to be coming down the road. And spoiler alert, because I've read Deuteronomy before and the book of Joshua before, is that they're even told, if you do this, this is the consequences. And I think even in the book of Joshua says to the effect, when you screw up, this is what's going to happen. So it's not a matter of if, it's like, you're going to mess up and you're going to mess up big. And here's what the consequences are going to be. And of course, they're like, oh no, we'll be fine. And so I think for, the question why God was so adamant, because He knew what the consequences would be from His judgment, but also the natural consequences. Because if you don't cleanse out the bad influences from your life, from what's around you, they're going to influence you. That's why their influence is. I was actually thinking how many times I could say influence or influences in the same sentence, but I think I can stick with 3.
Yeah. I don't want to get too far, right? All right. I think we're ready for 6.
Yes, sir.
Is the distinction between murderer and manslayer in Numbers 35 challenging one for you? Why or why not? This one's not hard for me. To me, it's matches what we have today in our justice system. You have murder, you have manslaughter. When it's
evil
an
in
accident,
heart, intention, and then.
So,
but the thing is, manslayer and here, you would not go to court for manslaughter. They'd be like, well, you got him, and time for a funeral.
Yeah.
But I think knowing the culture at the time, where they were familiar with the lex talionis, an eye for an eye, realize, and also I think this is an advancement of a justice system saying, you know what, it was an accident, so we need to give have a place to where a person can go to and then have a trial.
Yeah.
Have a fair trial, not just everyone take matters into their own hands, which would be an easy temptation to do. And so, it didn't propose a problem for me, just because understanding the ancient world, but also we understand our current situation, self-defense, where someone might lose a life. I mean, if someone broke in your home and, wheeled a pistol at you, I imagine if you had your own pistol, you would empty that mag into that intruder.
There's going to be a little bit more than a pistol shot at him, so.
When she made some comment too, let's see if I can find that. And I wrote it down. When God sets out standards for what constitutes being a murderer versus being a manslayer, and it involves weighing the killer's motives, that's a tough thing to do since we can't see people's hearts like God can. So I kind of wrote that down too as well. That's kind of difficult to...
Yeah.
Well, and I think
I did
too,
go ahead, sorry.
The death penalty practices in the ancient world as well, and also some of it's described in Scripture, again, points to the seriousness of how God felt about some of these violations, whether it was murder, stealing, rape. I mean, all that stuff's covered in there, and so God's saying this is a serious offense, and so and that's where, again, as I mentioned when we started Leviticus, I mean, the emphasis is holiness, and so when we see in Numbers, of course, the previous generation is dying out, but when we get into Deuteronomy here, Moses is going to recap everything and remind them who they are and who they're supposed to be as they prepare to enter the promised land.
One of the things I did like is how God gave them distinctions between murder and manslaying or slayer. It's kind of nice that God does that for us. He gives us that box, you're here or here, kind of gives you that check this, check this, check this. Okay, man, check this, murder.
You're here, yeah.
Yeah, it's, so, but it's also, the Avenger of Blood also was pretty interesting, that the closest male relative would pretty much be the executioner in that situation. But it was pretty interesting to learn ancient culture and in-depth ancient culture, I guess.
Number 7.
Number 7.
What does it reveal about God's character that he protects specific plots of land for the descendants of Esau and Lot, even though they aren't among the tribes of Israel? Does Scripture give us any indication of why he does this?
I think to a degree, and I think there's probably a lot can be said about this, is that in a way God also honors the promises of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob when it comes to their relatives. I mean, when Abraham and Lot separate, say, you pick, and and I'll take what's left. And so Abraham was supposed to be the patriarch, and of course the ideal Jew too. And so I think in a sense, God does honor those agreements to his faithful.
Yeah. I kind of was just like, they're still a part of his people for the most part, like came from the lineage of, not from Abraham, but it's his nephew. And then Esau was his son? No.
What was Jacob and Esau were brothers.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So there'd be sons of Isaac.
Isaac. Okay. Yeah. I was trying to put that back in there. It's from the same lineage though. So it's still a part of that.
They're still family.
Yeah.
They are still family. That's what I said too. It's still family, even though, still family.
But I was thinking about it, there was agreements between, those who were the chosen line and the rest of the family. So I thought that was pretty cool that, God honors that.
Yep.
It just shows his generosity of taking care of them.
Well, and I think too that, God also gives things for a time and a season, because we'll see later too, like with the Assyrians, Babylonians, when God talks to or has a prophetic message through a prophet to one of the pagan kings or in the exile, God will say, "I gave this to you so that you could do X, Y, and Z." And now, and then of course we prophecies. Now this is going to be taken from you, by X, Y, and Z, and so, anyways, that's just another thought. And of course, we'll get there in about 10 weeks, 15 weeks.
I was calculating Matthew in my head. I'm going, I wonder what week that will be. That might be 42.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you.
Another thought I had, during our reading this week too, was when
You're right on, by the way. It's 42.
Really? I love it.
Those two tribes wanted to stay on the other side of the Jordan as they're preparing to cross the Jordan.
What is it? The half? What are they?
It was Reuben and Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh.
Half tribe, yeah.
I don't know about your guys' translation, but again, I'm reading the Jewish Study Bible, and they use the word shock troops as far as the description of their commitment. Yeah. And so I was reading the notes in the Study Bible, and basically they were volunteering to be always on the front lines. So they were so determined to have that land. Is like, we're willing to be on the front lines to this whole ordeal, to make sure that you guys get, what is promised on the other side of the Jordan, as long as we get to keep this. And so, but I was just blown away by the word choice of shock troops.
It's interesting.
So this is just a question that popped in my mind when you were speaking of that. Is, so from what I got from this is that they were more of an agricultural tribe, but they liked the ground that they were at, so that's why they wanted that, or is there something else that I missed?
I think at the time the land where they're at it was very attractive, and of course compared to the flowing fields of Kansas, we would look over there and be like, really, this is attractive to you? Because David writes about in the Psalms the green fields of the Judah and the land there, and you can go today and you'd be like, these are the fields. I mean, these look very barren. But again, to understand the land of flowing milk and honey, what made it so unique especially for the shepherds there is that the dew would be so heavy on the grass on the ground that the sheep could get the moisture that they need just by eating the grass that they're on in many of those fields. And so it's definitely a unique climate and with the agriculture over there. So I think just that part of the land where they were at, I mean, there's probably a lot of appealing aspects to it. And there's also clear delineations to where some of the mountainous regions, and then right when you get to the foot, boom, it's like farmland. And so,
okay,
something to maybe the Google map and just
put really
right look here. It out. Check it out. Look at it.
All right, number 8, the God shot. What is your favorite thing you read about God's character in your God shots from this week?
Let me go first.
Go for it, lady.
I chose day 66. Out of all the 10 commandments, there are 2 he keeps repeating. You shall have no other gods before me, and rest. What other God commands rest? Most of our idols demand more from us, more striving, more trying, more doing. He says, nope, not my people. The people of false gods run themselves ragged, but my people are provided for even when they take a day off to spend with me. He's where the rest is, and he's where the joy is.
Very good. Very good. All right. Mine was 67. God takes our fidelity to him seriously. Moses commands that Israel's temptations be eradicated. John Owen said, be killing sin or it'll be killing you. I really like that. Mm-hmm. Do we treat our temptations the way Moses does, like they're a predator out to destroy us? Or do we try to tame them and keep them for ourselves like the soldiers did? God is so vigilant with our hearts, and he knows it's not easy to be strong. He wants temptations eradicated if they might lead us to forget our deepest joy is found in him. May God's Spirit always help us remember he is where the joy is. Yeah. And of course, we see in the New Testament, flee from temptation. And so kind of the same idea. And that's, I really love the quote, be killing sin or be killing you. And so for me, just that intentionality of removing those temptations so you don't sin in your life.
Yeah. I'll round it out with day 68. Excuse me, sorry. Yahweh is superior to all other gods. At the very beginning of all of Moses' recapping, the scripture says, the people of Israel went out triumphantly in the sight of all the Egyptians, while the Egyptians were burying all their firstborns, whom the Lord has struck down among them. On their gods also the Lord executes judgments. God defeats his enemies, including other gods. Yahweh never denies that there are other gods. He just indicates that he is superior to them, that the core belief of monotheism, he is the King of kings and Lords of lords. He also is the God of gods. In the 10 Commandments, he says, you shall have no other gods before me. He doesn't say you shall acknowledge that there is no other gods exist. Instead, he says no other god should get our affection and attention. There's 2 angles to this. First, anything we worship can be false gods or idols to us. And second, there's other spirits, beings, demonic enemy forces that head up other world religions. There are demon gods. And there have been seen demon gods Baal in our other readings. We've seen the demon god Moloch. These are the demon gods of other religions. They are not equal to God, and it is no way that they're a threat to him. Yahweh is the one true God, and he sends other gods running. He shows them their limitations, and he shows them his wrath. And he shows them his wrath, and he shows us, his kids, his great and protective love. He is where the joy is. So there's a lot there, and that kind of just, So, but the kind of the part that stuck out to me, and I don't know if it was just my interpretation of it or the way it was taught to me, is that God in the book was saying he's the only one. There is no other, where this kind of, she looks at the words itself and explains that he's not saying there isn't any other gods or other beings, that he is the one, only one worth, like she says, the attention or the affection and attention. So, yeah.
And there is a lot of competition, but he is.
Yeah, he is the one and
We
only.
should be seeking.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's where the thought, and I totally spaced because I was going to look it up. Ray Vonderlaan does a study on Exodus in one of his videos where he talks about all of the plagues are basically in the face of the Egyptian gods to show how powerless they actually were. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to get the book because in the study guide with the video, it actually lists the gods, the Egyptian gods. So I apologize. Everyone.
It's all right.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah. I just will say, since starting to research this stuff, that my algorithms on social medias have changed. It's funny, but it's true. Like how many things, like one of them was, I actually just watched today when I was, but it was a devil worshiper, and got down to the point where he was drinking animal blood and going, and he said he felt like there was a demon inside of him. There was a church, and he named it. I've never heard of the guy's name. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it seemed like it was a very devout Christian in New York. And he said he went over there, but in his mind, he was going to go there and literally fight them, with fists, hit them, assault them. And he said he got into about the distance between me and Josh, and he said literally there was a ring of fire, and that pushed me back. And he said with the force of and he said at the time I didn't know what it was, but now I know it's the Holy Spirit and saved me. He said I just broke down and instantly became became a believer that moment. And he said it was so powerful. But yeah, it's giving me chills now. But, you know, I've been getting a lot more of these things, you know, and I think it's God telling me, you know, pass it on, that there is things going. So I think we're doing good things. So
yeah, I noticed I get different videos depending on which sermon series I'm preaching.
yeah.
So like when I did the marriage series last fall, I mean, I was getting marriage videos, and then you know, pivoting to Christmas, of course, Christmas videos, and then you know, the last series. Yeah, I just the videos tend to change depending on what I'm preaching on.
But it's been pretty cool though, seeing, and it's kind of just been following what we've been, you know, kind of what the questions are. And so, and it was when I read that, I was like, it kind of reminded me of that. So it's pretty cool that, you know, God is it's kind of showing me that God is with me, you know, it's
present.
Yeah. He's showing me like,
For sure.
You know, we're good. And so, but yeah, it's nice.
Yep. All right. Keep along with us for next week. We'll be week 11, and we will be reading Deuteronomy chapter 3 all the way to chapter 23. So those are days 71 to 77. Hopefully you stay with us. Again, if you got any questions or comments, you can put those in the comment section below. If not, we'll see you next week. Take care, and God bless.
Good week.
See you guys.
Bye.